Hi everyone, in this video we'll look at chapter 21 and finish out our exam 3 prep and look at consumer choice theory. So the big thing with consumer choice, and one of the big things that really constrains us, is our budget constraint. This tells us what combinations of goods can we purchase given our income. So just to get things started, I have this example. Suppose we make $1,000, or we have $1,000 left over, whatever we want to think of it as. And the price of a meal averages about $15, and the price of gas is $2.50 a gallon. So the first two things in finding our budget constraint we'll want to know is how many meals can we afford, right? That is if we don't purchase any gas. So in this case, we'll take our income divided by the price of a meal, which is $1,000 divided by 15. This comes out to be about 67. Right, so our meals, we can purchase either 67 meals, or we can look at the quantity of food if the quantity of gas if we don't purchase any meals. This case, again, we'll take our income divided by the price of gas, which is 1,000 divided by 250. And this will give us 400 gallons of gas, right? So in gas, we'll be at 400. Then if we combine these two, we'll have our budget constraint. So a question that may come up is, right, we have these points, but what happens if we purchase 100 gallons of gas? Then how many meals can we afford? So to do this, we'll take we know that the quantity of gas is 100. In this case, we spent, or our total cost of gas would be, say, 100 gallons times 250 a gallon. So the overall, or I should say the total cost of our gas would be equal to $400. So this means our total cost of food now will be equal to our income minus what we spent on gas. So this gives us 1,000 minus 400, and this would come out to 600 to be our total cost of food. So to find out how much food we bought, we take QF would be equal to 600 divided by 15, or how much we spent on food divided by the price of food. And this would come out to about 50, or not about, it would come out to 50 units of food, or 50 meals. So graphically, what we would say is if we purchase 100 gallons of gas, this point would also give us 50 meals. So when we think about our consumer choice theory, right, and it's going to look at other choices like this, but the big thing about consumer choice is going to be the trade-offs that consumers face. Right, so we have a choice to work more or work less. We have a choice what allocation of goods do we want to buy. But the big idea is consumers face trade-offs, and we want to see that and see kind of how that works. And with our budget constraints, we run into 3 different types of points, which I'm going to label as a green, a red, and a blue point. So our red point is inside the budget constraint. And if we have a point here, we're going to say that we're not using all of our income. Right, so I make $1,000. If I'm at this red point, which is inside the budget constraint, I might be leaving like 200 or 400 not spent. So in this case, again, not using all of our income. The point out here outside, which I've labeled as blue, again, that's outside of our budget constraint. And this is going to be a point that this will be an allocation that we cannot afford. right? So at this point, I'm making $20,000 a year, and I want to take 10 private jet flights around the country, right? It's something I can't afford. I don't have the money for it. Oops. The last type of point we have is this green one, and this is a point that is lying on the budget constraint. And this is an allocation where we're using all of our available funds. Right? This point might also be thought of as like a balanced budget. So on this green point, I have budgeted $1,000 for food and gas, and I use all $1,000 for it, which, depending on where we are, is maybe good or bad depending on your situation. But for the most part, and for our model, we want to think that we use all the budget, everything we budget for one item, we use all of it. So when we get into these, we run into these things called indifference curves, and they look kind of like this, right? And they can be higher than each other or lower than each other, right? Whatever we want them to be, they can be. A couple key things, though, if you remember, they're going to be downward sloping, and a curve that's higher is going to be preferred to one that's lower. But again, these are indifference curves, and they are a set of allocations that we are indifferent to. And with these, a couple things that we saw. One, they're downward sloping. Two, I2 is preferred to I1. So as we go out, they're more preferred to each other. I1 is preferred to I0, and I2 also would be preferred to I0. So as we move out along these curves, right, if one is higher than another, we prefer that higher allocation or that higher indifference curve. In economics, and especially in our class, we hardly ever have the idea that less is more. For the most part, more is more. The more goods I can have, the better I am off I am, especially as a consumer. And with our indifference curves, we ran into this idea, or we ran into this calculation, and it's called the marginal rate of substitution. And basically what this said is, how much of one good can I give up? Or let's say that it says what trade-off of goods keeps me equally happy. Right, and with this, what we would say is the big way to find this is we would say that our marginal rate of substitution will be equal to the slope of an indifference curve. Right, so if I can give up 6 fish in exchange for 1 mango and be equally happy, my marginal rate of substitution will be 6 fish for 1 mango at a certain point. And what we'll see is, for the most part, our marginal rate of substitution will vary along an indifference curve. And especially if that indifference curve is bowed inward. Right, so for most goods, right, if I have a room full of fish, I might be willing to give up a fish for a relatively small amount of mangoes, but if I only have 2 fish, it might take more mangoes for me to get rid of my last fish. However, this will also be constant if our indifference curve is flat. Or if our indifference curve, I shouldn't say flat, is a straight line. So if you think about something like nickels and dimes, right, I really don't care between them, right, as long as I have whatever's owed to me I'm happy. I don't really care if I have three dimes or 6 nickels, right? It doesn't make a difference. As long as that's the case, I'm happy and good to go. So a couple things that we ran into with this is different types of indifference curves. And if we look at the extremes, we can kind of see what we really want to see. So suppose we have two goods that are perfect substitutes. And this would be something like nickels and dimes. Right, for the most part, if you go out to a vending machine, and assuming it takes all currency, it doesn't care if you pay all nickels or all dimes. It's to the machine, it's the same. Similarly to me, if you had to pay me back for whatever, I don't. If you say you owe me 30 cents, I don't care if you give me 3 dimes or 6 nickels. So with perfect substitutes, we'll see our indifference curves. Right, so if we have nickels and dimes, we'll see our indifference curves look something like this, right? With straight lines that go out. The more I'd rather have 3 nickels. I'd rather have 3 dimes than 5 nickels, and so on. And the other type of good the other types of goods that we saw that were more extreme was our perfect complements. And with these, we said that our indifference curves looked like L's. So we might have left versus right shoes. Right, so if I don't have any right shoes, the left shoe doesn't do me any good to match it. So if we had, say, left shoes up here, right shoes up here, right, we'll end up getting these L's as our indifference curve. And just so we have that distinction, I'll make that blue. Right, so the only way we can be better off is to have more of each shoe. If I have 1,000 left shoes and only 5 right shoes, I may as well only have 5 left shoes and 5 right shoes. So with our goods, one of the last things we kind of saw with this was the income effect. Or what we kind of want to see is what happens if not income effect, but what happens if our income increases? And for this, we kind of had 3 different situations. So suppose we had, say, mangoes and fish. Then we had our budget constraint. So we have our initial budget constraint, which is down here relatively low. Then we have a new budget constraint. Right, we get a new job, we get a raise, or we just allocate more money to food, whatever the case is. So as this green dot was our initial distribution of what we initially purchased, and we have kind of 3 situations that can come up out of this. So this first one, I'm going to label green. The second one, I'll do red. The third one is blue. So if both goods are normal, we'll end up here in this green range. Right, and a normal good is just where as income increases or an increase in income will lead to an increase in our quantity demanded. And the other type of good that we mentioned is an inferior good, where as our income increases, we'll see our QD fall. So if our mangoes are inferior and fish are normal, we'll be down here in this red zone, because we had this increase in goods, but now we demand more fish and less mango. And then up in this blue zone, we'll have just the opposite, where mangoes are normal, but fish are inferior. The idea here again, as we move up, we're producing less fish, but more mangoes. So last type of good that we ran into, which is a type of it is an inferior good, but we looked at this idea of Giffen goods, and these are goods, kind of 2 things. One, as the price of a Giffen increases, we'll also see that the quantity demanded of the Giffen will also increase. And these are goods that violate, oops, let's rewrite that. They violate the law of demand. And the idea here with the Giffen good is they're going to be inferior. And the idea comes that, right, so we already know that for an inferior good, right, an increase in income leads to a decrease in our demand. Well, if this is the case, then for an inferior good, when we cut our income, we're going to start to demand more of that good. So if the price of a good, so say the price of the Giffen increases, this is similar to our income decreasing, right? Because if, say, gas goes up to $10 today, and if everything were to double in price overnight, I don't have the same purchasing power, so it's similar to my income decreasing, which causes our quantity demand to increase. Therefore, the price of the Giffen increases. Giffen increasing leads to the quantity of the Giffen to also increase. And graphically, what this looks like, suppose we have our potatoes and fish, or potatoes and meat. Then we had an initial allocation somewhere, say somewhere down here. If the price of potatoes goes up, that's going to cause our curve to pivot down, and our new allocation will come up to, say, here. So since potatoes are inferior, right, we now, since potatoes are inferior, as our curve pushes out, we produce less. However, since they're inferior and they are a Giffen good, the price of potatoes went up, which means we can afford less, led to us consuming more potatoes, right? And that is the idea of a Giffen good. So as you're looking through anything, if you need anything, feel free to let me know. If there's anything I can do coming up to the test or closing out the semester, feel free to let me know. Have a good day.